Becky, thanks for being here. Take two. One thing I love about podcasts is that sometimes it goes brilliantly and other times it doesn't, and you have to just kind of have to make it work.
You have to roll with it, which is fine. I got a practice run, so I'm quite happy with that.
But now you know what all my questions are. That's the challenge.
So you just have to ask me different things.
We will do different things, absolutely. Becky, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Apologies for the false start.
Not a problem. It's a pleasure being here.
But today I really wanted to have a good chat with you just about you becoming a CEO, running your own organisation, becoming the founder. You know, I often look at the CEO role as very aspirational as a role. A lot of people would like to get there and become a CEO. A lot of people would love to found their own business and run their own marketing agency, run their own businesses. And I also think a lot of people, including me, you know, find that daunting, and might be aspirational, but daunting at the same time. And I really wanted to talk today about that journey which you've gone on to have the confidence to be able to say, right, now is the right time to set up my own agency. Now is the right time. I've got the right knowledge to do so. So where did it all start for you? Did you go to university? How did you get into the business?
I went to university. I studied maths and management sciences in Manchester, all the M's. I ended up doing that by accident, really. I'd intended to do English at Nottingham, but I didn't get the grades and I got an A for my maths. So that's where I ended up. And one of the modules, or two of the modules within that course, were around marketing. And I suppose that's what piqued my interest, and my career, I guess, developed from there. And
what did that first role look like when you got into marketing? And also, I imagine it must be quite hard to get into that first marketing role, you know, with limited experience. How did you get into it?
So I think it was probably different back in the day from where it is now. I think the expectation now, and certainly when I'm looking at hiring new graduates coming on board, I expect them to have done quite a lot of practical stuff, you know, and been out and had their own blog or done bits and pieces voluntarily, whereas I think you didn't really have that opportunity back in the day because we didn't have digital channels, so it wasn't as easy. But no, you're right, it's hard to get into marketing roles, and I think regardless of whether you're looking at getting into a big enterprise or if you're looking at, you know, agency world, which I was, if you follow the traditional route, you do the milk round, you do the graduate entry, there are hundreds and hundreds of people applying for every single role. At one point I joked I could have wallpapered my whole bedroom with rejection letters, because that's kind of the nature of the beast. But yeah, it was kind of serendipity that I fell into my first agency role. When I was a student, I'd actually gone to the job centre to try and find a job for my sister who was going off travelling and just wanted to earn some money, and there was a marketing agency that had advertised they needed somebody to do data cleaning. I thought, well, I'm not going to let my sister take that job. It's in a marketing agency. I'm going to go and listen. And it was, you know, it was dull as ditchwater. It was phoning up names on lists and checking that they were still working there. But it meant I had that connection. And actually, I left university, went to France. I was an au pair for a few months. I went and lived in Paris for a very short time and got a phone call out of the blue from this agency, which was a startup, and said, do you want a job?
Right,
yeah.
Really?
And I pretty much just came straight back, and that was that.
What was it like? You said you had lots of rejection letters at the beginning. What was it like going through that initial rejection, thinking, oh, you don't necessarily have the experience, you're getting rejection letters? I know it's really hard because you can get very disheartened at that very first stage, thinking, did that really challenge your aspiration to get into marketing?
No, I mean, I think partly everybody's going through the same thing. You're at that stage in life, but I guess I've always been a kind of glass half full kind of person that expects the worst and hopes for the best. So, you know, if you get one rejection, that's fine. You learn from it and you move on to the next one. I think that's probably my philosophy for life, and it hasn't done me too badly so far.
So you get a call almost out of the blue. Was it an organisation that you'd applied to previously, or is it how did you get?
So it's because I'd been doing this data cleaning for them. So they knew me, and they knew I was doing a marketing degree, and they knew that was what I wanted to do. But they were a startup. They just didn't need somebody until they needed somebody, if you know what I mean. And then, I mean, that's the easiest way, isn't it, to hire somebody who's just phone up a person you know. And and they're a B2B tech agency. They were an offshoot of an agency in London that had been set up essentially by two guys, Mark Mason and Simon Zimbler, that had worked client side in tech and had basically been looking for a B2B tech marketing agency, of which there are quite a lot now. But back in the day, there weren't really any. And they approached Anderson and Lemke and said, right, we want to set up an agency in Bristol that does B2B tech. So they had no experience being in an agency, no experience running a business, but I guess a passion and a knowledge and understanding of the sector. And they were great bosses, great role models, and they were the founders and joint CEOs, joint managing directors at the age of 30. So, that I guess shows you the art of the possible. And I think probably that's what got me started on my journey.
Well, you mentioned before that they were good mentors, they were good, they were inspirational for you. What were the things that they were doing, or the traits that they were doing that you thought, that's great for you to be learning at this stage?
I think they were honest, and they were smart, and they were hardworking. They just people that I guess that were doing stuff right. There wasn't a magic formula. I mean, actually, at different stages in my career, I've worked with what I call these people of enormous brain that can come in and just transform stuff in a second. It wasn't like that. They were just, I guess, consistent and supportive. I didn't really get promoted at all. In 3 years, I just grafted. But it was okay because you were learning, and I think the learning is the most important part of the journey. And I suppose that's the reflection, is they gave me that opportunity to learn how to learn my craft, learn what to do, and also learn, I guess, a bit about what I wanted to do next.
And how did that shape your thinking for where you went next?
I knew I needed to go to London. I knew I wanted to have a career in advertising, and that's where all the big marketing agencies and agency networks were.
So you felt like a pull, you needed to be in London. Was it mainly because that's where the biggest places were, and you needed to work, or you wanted to work for some of the biggest organisations?
I didn't really know any other regional agencies, right, if I'm honest. And I mean, I don't know, but I think there were a lot less in those days than there are now. I mean, now, particularly if I think about, places like Bristol and Oxford, there are a lot of creative agencies and digital agencies in those places, but I don't think there particularly were in those days. It's a bit like if you want to work in finance, you used to have to go work in the city. Yeah. Exactly the same. If you want to work in marketing, you need to go work in Soho. And why would you not want to at the age of 23? That's exciting.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, going to the big city.
Yeah.
And I suppose there you're able to really practice your craft, but almost live in it every single day.
Yes, exactly. And I had two experiences working two different agencies fairly swiftly. I worked the first one for a year in London and then moved quickly on to somewhere else. The first one was a bit of a sweatshop. It was an absolute opposite of my first agency experience. But again, the stuff you learn from working for bad bosses, is as useful as the stuff you learn from working for good bosses, I guess. And the first and last time I ever got made redundant was at 10:30 on a Friday night, which really says the sort of organisation it was. It's you're not redundant if you're in the office at 10:30 on a Friday night. And it wasn't just me. There were 10 of us all got let go at the same time. So
how did that happen? I mean, was that just someone came in the office and said, right, this is over, or is it a text message? I mean, how did they communicate it?
It's a long time ago. We had to go into the boardroom and sat down, and they said, well, yeah, okay, none of you have you'll have jobs anymore, you all need to go. It was a very money focused organisation, which is not a bad thing to focus on the bottom line, don't get me wrong, but I mean, we used to have these 8:00 Monday morning meetings that used to talk about, how much revenue have you generated from your client, what margin are you making, what are you going to sell this week. It was not really how we do marketing, not how I run my agency, that's for sure. And so that was the rationale that they had. You don't want anybody to be complacent, you don't want anyone to sit on your laurels, you don't want the cost of all these people, so you get them to the point where they've generated all this revenue, then let them go, cut your costs back and go again. That way everybody's hungry for it, I suppose. That was their methodology. They don't exist anymore, so clearly it didn't work.
Yeah. Well, I think we kind of briefly mentioned this before, is that some of those leaders that or businesses that you follow back then, that or you're part of that then, that don't set the right example, that almost builds who you're going to be or who you choose not to be as well. I mean, that's, like I mentioned, was that, you know, some of the best leaders that I've worked with, I've tried to take parts of what they've done, and then just think, right, I'm going to keep those bits, but I'm going to reject these other parts. And I think it allows you to shape who you're going to be. And like you said, you don't run your business like that, you know, probably exactly because of that experience that you had.
Almost certainly. I mean, yeah, I wake up in the morning and quite often think, well, what on earth am I doing? Imposter syndrome is absolutely real. You know, you feel like you're making it up as you go along, but I think that keeps you humble. It makes it real, you know. And I think, you know, however long you've been doing this or any job for, you can always learn from the people around you. And I suppose I bring that to the way I lead my team. And touch wood, you know, seems to be working.
There's lots of wood in here. So
yeah, there's loads of wood. It's a great big wooden table.
You can just hold, you can touch all of the wood you like.
It's good.
But and at quite a young age, you know, you're leading a large, I suppose, division of people, 20, 30 people. I mean, what was that like? I know you mentioned it was a while ago, but, you know, have such responsibility at such a young age.
I suppose I didn't really think about it in that way. I just went in and did my job. It is very different when you're leading your own business versus being a leader within an organisation that's run by somebody else. I knew my job. I knew what I needed to do, and I had a team of people that needed to, you know, do certain jobs. So that's what we did. Yeah, I don't remember ever making conscious effort, you know, to be a leader or to think about my management style or, you know, what it was going to be like taking on other people on my team. I'm naturally very bossy kind of person.
I suppose, was it because you were focused on the outcome for your client, focused on the goal, focused creatively, and you had a vision and just went with it?
I think so. I think it's partly that, and I think, I mean, what we're talking about here is when I was working kind of at GGT, which then became TBWA GGT, where I was working on things like NatWest and Marks and Spencers, where they were quite big teams. The reality is that actually the company had a very good culture and it hired brilliant people. So I suppose the big difference between managing or leading a team within that environment and what I'm doing now is that culture's being created. You don't have to create that culture. You don't have to create that vibe. Yes, you're responsible for hiring individuals, but actually there's already a critical mass, if you like. So what you're doing is you're jumping on somebody else's bus. And actually that's much easier to do, particularly if it's a good bus, than it is, you know, making your own. And I don't think I ever really stopped and thought about, you know, being a leader or what being a leader meant. I just got on and did it.
Just got on and did it.
Yeah, exactly. Too busy doing the work.
Yeah. So you had a few. How long were you in that role for?
Oh gosh, so I was at TBWA from. I'm gonna work it out now. I'm going to say it was 7 or 8 years. It was quite a long time in agency. Well, certainly the longest time I worked for one individual organisation. Yeah. And
then when you decided that came to an end, was that quite a difficult time? Thinking, right, I'm going to take my career in a different direction here.
No, not really. So I left to go on maternity leave. So that was the decision that was made. I wasn't going to give birth on work and carry on. But I think in hindsight, you know, I was pretty burnt out. My head was sort of fit to explode. And I think working at quite a senior level within one division of a kind of a global advertising agency network, there wasn't much more headroom for me to kind of get promoted without sort of going to group level, joining the board or anything like that. And I wasn't at that point. I was too young. And I'd had a few knockbacks in terms of wanting to kind of push for that next level. And I wasn't ready for it. So I think I was feeling a little bit like lost, if you like, in terms of where my career needed to go. So it was very much kind of serendipity that coincided with wanting to have a bit of focus, have a family, And it allowed me to take a step back briefly, kind of regather my thoughts, and then jump back in with a different approach, if you like.
Yeah. And I think, did you say you set up some different businesses while you're raising the children?
Oh, I did all sorts of different things. So I'm as anybody that knows me will know, I'm not very good at sitting still. So I did lots of things. So I was working, I was sort of helping with the finances and the bookkeeping in my husband's business at the time. I was doing some marketing consultancy for a high growth tech brand. I was vice chair of the preschool, and I set up a wedding cake and birthday cake design business. So I was supplying cakes to lots of sort of local coffee shops and restaurants and things, and designing wedding cakes, and had 2 preschool kids as well.
Wow. That sounds like a really busy time.
It's quite busy, but not particularly lucrative, which is always the challenge with these things. You know, you can make yourself very busy doing lots of stuff, and it can be good stuff, you know, but actually you need to make money as well. You know, and finding that balance can be hard. I think it's actually where quite a lot of sort of founders and entrepreneurs sometimes get unstuck, because you know, you have the vision, the thing you want to achieve, but you also need to make the money in order to be able to do it. And I think a lot of, particularly the kind of more visionary CEOs, are not particularly money driven.
Right. Okay.
So that balance between how do you drive for success while also staying true to what you believe in and what you're trying to achieve is very difficult.
I can imagine. That sounds challenging.
Yeah.
So then, was there a point then which you said, right, I want to go back, or I want to be back in marketing? You know, use that years of experience that you've got. You want to drive an organisation forward. What was your thinking when you said, right, maybe I want to get back into this corporate world?
So it was a financial decision that was. But I liked being my own boss. Wasn't earning enough money.
Yeah.
You know, and it was around about the time my eldest child was starting school, so I had a bit more time. So I went and I became marketing director of a learning and development business. So it was my first experience working client side, and I had thought that was going to be what I wanted to do. My thinking was, working in agency, you're always an outsider. You can advise, you can consult, but actually you're not making the real decisions. And particularly when you're working with big brands, you're so far removed from the decision making, you can't really have an influence. And I knew that I didn't want to, I mean, people that know me will have heard me say this a lot, but I didn't want to help Marks and Spencer sell knickers, and I didn't want to help NatWest sell personal loans. That's not, you know, I don't want that written on my gravestone. That's not that's not what I want my legacy to be. I wanted to do something that mattered. So my thinking was, well, if I go and work client side for a smaller organisation, then I can be embedded in it. I can work with the sales team, I can work with the board, I can help them achieve what they need to achieve and actually put my skills to real positive use. But the reality is it's not really quite like that. And I think in a lot of organisations, definitely the one that I worked for at the time, marketing was kind of seen as a discretionary thing, kind of a bolt on after you've decided the strategy and you've done everything else. And the sales team have decided who they're going to target, then we'll speak to the marketing person and they'll make us a website, or they'll do a brochure, or they'll sort out this event. And that, for me, that's not what marketing is all about. Marketing is about changing behaviour. Marketing is about understanding, you know, what's going on in the world, how are people behaving, and, you know, what can we do to influence that behaviour. So it's a very different way of doing things. So, I mean, I spent 3 years as a marketing director, working with sales team, learning what worked and didn't work. And I kind of did everything I could, got them as far as I could go. But at the end of the day, I was a bit bored and a bit frustrated, and thought, well, actually, I'd much rather go back and work agency side, because within an agency, you have the opportunity to experience lots of different brands, lots of different companies, and learn from one and apply it to another, so that you can do your very best work. When you're just, with the best will in the world, a client-side marketeer sitting in the same office day after day, you're not getting that opportunity to learn from peers and just stretch the boundaries, I guess, of what's possible. And what I don't want to do is do average work. There's no benefit to that. Somebody else can do that.
Can I ask, just to take you back to slightly, because of course, for me with my sales background, and you mentioned that you took that organisation as far as you could.
Yeah.
And there was obviously marketing and sales, should be working hand in hand. What did you find? Where were the challenges? Where were the opportunities in that? Because, I've worked in this for 20 years within sales and leading sales teams. And to varying levels, have we done well with marketing? And, sometimes when it's been great, it's been fantastic. Other times it just hasn't quite worked. And it should go hand in hand, but it doesn't always. What do you think makes it work, that relationship between sales and marketing and having a joined up strategy?
I think probably that the thing that works best is a kind of a mutual respect and a partnership.
Yeah.
I think very often, and I've seen this a lot, salespeople tend to think of marketing as a service provider to them. So sales need this stuff, marketing, can you help me with it? And that doesn't tend to sit very well with marketeers, who are often looking at, the big picture. They're looking at the market, they're looking at competitors, they're really thinking about what the strategy should be. So when the salespeople come and say, can I have a leaflet, or whatever it happens to be, the marketeer's obvious answer is, well, why do you need a leaflet? Why don't we develop an ABM program? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? And the salesman, I don't even know what an ABM program is. Can I just have my leaflet? And I think that's where it tends to go wrong. I think probably in the same way we were talking about good bosses and bad bosses, I think it's probably, good sales and marketing relationships breed more good sales and marketing relationships. And obviously in much larger organisations, I think it's more established, so people understand about enablement and they understand how it will work and there's a structure to it. I think in a small organisation, particularly when it's growing, there can be a friction because salespeople often have, specific sales targets they want to achieve. They've got certain things they're going after. And if marketing are not helping them to do that, then they feel like they're an obstruction, and you get this, this sort of constant, we need leads, whether they're wrong leads. And so marketing is saying to sales, here are your leads, now where are the sales? And the sales are going, well, you've given us these leads, but they're awful. We can't sell to them. And so you've got to change the conversation. You've got to change the conversation to working together from the beginning. And I think if you have a joined up strategy from the start, then I think it's fine. But I think there are barriers to that probably that have come from bad experiences. Yeah.
It's interesting actually, because what you've just described there is that salespeople often end up in that situation, which is we've got a target, we've got a number, and you've got to hit that by the end of the year. And if you don't do a certain amount of your target, you lose your job. So we're always in this fight or flight stage, where it is, where's the next deal coming from? And it's very, very hard to get out of that. And I think that's where you, as an individual contributor, it's hard to kind of step out of that, because you have to be focused, and the organisation is pushing you to focus on that number. Where I think it should land is that your sales leadership then create the conduit, so therefore they can kind of bring it all together, because of course they can take that view, and therefore you can drive a good strategy together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I think about kind of recent organisations we've been working with, a data quality business, and they have a CRO who manages sales and marketing. Sales and marketing work together for him, and they're not separate. It's a sales and marketing department. People have different roles within it, but that division is not there. It's sort of the working together is baked in.
Yeah. I think it kind of, when you have a CRO covering over both realms of marketing and sales, it kind of brings it under the right leadership, the right banner. It feels better like that, I think for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I think the other thing as well that hampers marketing, I think, is everybody feels like they can do marketing these days. I mean, I think particularly in smaller organisations where you start from scratch, you've got to build the website, you've got to set up the email marketing. Everybody feels like they can do a bit of, I can write content. And so unless you've seen marketing done really well, there's a sort of a skepticism around. I think, why are we paying all this money to do all this stuff? I could do it better myself. I know what I want to write. I know what I need it to say. I know how I need to target. Why do I need these marketing people? And I think that's quite hard. We've had a situation recently where we, as an agency, we almost closed the deal with a really lovely entrepreneurial SaaS business, a really great relationship with the CEO, several meetings with him. And he went to the board to get it signed off. And the board, it's your latest shiny object. What was wrong with the last 7 marketing agencies you hired? There's no arguing with that. You can't prove that it's different and it's going to work better. And maybe it won't if the organisation is resistant to it, unless you get in there and start doing it. So it becomes self-fulfilling. So to try and get out of that and demonstrate with results, well, this is what marketing can achieve, is really important. That's why within the agency that I'm running now, we are very focused on accelerating growth, and we talk a lot about not having vanity metrics and not focusing on likes and followers and all the rest of it, and actually focusing on the real challenges. And to be honest, if you can't have the conversations with the real senior decision makers about this is what we want to go, this is what we want to achieve, this is our vision, this is our mission, this is our purpose, marketing will always just be a bolt-on.
How did you get to founding? How did you get to founding your own organisation and business? How did that come about? And
okay,
we started putting a toe in there, just so let's get that.
Sorry, yeah, let me go back.
No, that's okay, but because it's exciting to know exactly how you got to that point, because where we're going to get to in this conversation is about the values, the mission, but also I think what's different from our previous conversation is that you are focused on those important metrics, revenue, profit, those types of things. That's what matters as an outcome. So how did you get to founding that business?
Yes, it's slightly more than just numbers, but I'll come to that. So when I left the leadership development business that I was working for as marketing director, I went back to agency side. That was my this is what I'm going to do. And I went for a small entrepreneurial agency locally. I thought this is my chance. I went in as head of business development, and I thought this is the end of the world. This is my oyster. I can go in and make a real change now. But if I'm honest, they were very parochial. So every time I would say, right, okay, we've got this opportunity to do this thing. I need to bring in creative. I need to bring in this expertise. I need to do this in certain ways. There was always pushback. Well, it's too expensive. We're not hiring a creative director. That's too expensive. Can you draw us an idea on the back of a fag packet and I'll get the designer to make it for £3.50? This is everything that I didn't want to do with marketing. You can't change businesses' fortunes with an idea is written on the back of a fag packet. I'm not a creative. I'm a strategist. I'm a marketeer. I'm not a creative. I love working with creative people, but that's not what I do. So if you ask me to do that, you're going to end up with bad work. So I worked with them for only a year. Actually, it was really disappointing because I think there was so much opportunity, but they just weren't open to listening to my way of doing things. And it was essentially we were working with a client that really needed an injection of that creativity at quite a high level. Didn't get it because the agency wasn't prepared to invest in it, and the client basically said, we're leaving. They phoned the CEO and said, we're leaving. We don't want to work with you anymore, but we would really like to work with Becky. They hadn't even spoken to me at this point. Will you hold her to a contract basically, or will you let her come with us? Because we're not going to work with you anyway. And luckily, the founder was I was going to say she was happy to let me go. I'm not sure she was happy, but she accepted that the client was going to go anyway. So what it meant is that I had a client that wanted to work with me, 3 months money. I thought, well, if I'm ever going to do it, now's the time. That's
an incredible situation to be in, to be wanted that much, but also I suppose that gives you that springboard, doesn't it? It gives you that opportunity to say, right, I can start doing this myself.
Yeah, I do wonder whether if I hadn't had that, whether I would have had the gumption to go and do it myself without that, safety net, if you like, of knowing I had a client and some money coming in. So they didn't stay particularly long, but by then I was off.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure I would have taken the plunge otherwise. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. It would be nice to think, well, I would have set it up 10 years earlier. But maybe if I hadn't had that push, I would never have done it, and I wouldn't be sitting here now.
Well, I think this is why I really wanted to kind of chat with you, is that a lot of people sit in that little point there, which is, I want to do something, but I haven't got the client yet, or I haven't got the chance to do it, or I'm not quite sure about the money. And I suppose sometimes you need that little push. It sounds like you were able to get that push, but maybe you wouldn't have necessarily done it if you hadn't.
No, I mean,
it's difficult, isn't it?
It is difficult, and everybody has complicated lives. I had stuff that was going on at home and all the rest of it as well, and as everybody does. But I mean, I think the reality is there are funding options available. There's advice, but there's so much more of that these days than there ever used to be. That it's easy to say, but there isn't really any excuse for not doing it. And not everybody will succeed. I mean, far more startups fail than succeed.
Yeah.
But it's not like it's some sort of great blot on your career that you'll never get a job again. If you leave the corporate world or whatever it is you're doing and go and set something up and do it and it doesn't work, think about what you've learned, and think about what you get from that experience. And whilst it's not nice to fail, failing is how we get to where we end up in this life. It's okay to fail, and I think you have to accept the possibility of failure in order to make that leap.
Yeah, I think you've got to get very comfortable with the fact that you're going to fail no matter what, and it's just...
We fail every day. Fail every day. But if you fail to learn from that, then that's when you're not going to succeed.
Yeah. So you have that first client. You mentioned they didn't stay for too long. How did the business start to build?
I just worked my network. I just spoke to lots and lots of people, and got more clients. I think that's pretty much what most small businesses do. You just get out there and talk to people. I'm not a particularly good salesperson, and I hate doing it. You sort of want people. You want people to just come to you and go, "Oh, I've heard how excellent you are. Can I please give you my business?" It doesn't really work like that. But nonetheless, people buy from people, and you have relationships with people. And there were, a few people obviously that I'd got to know through my career that were, willing to take a punt on me, because essentially the business was just me at that point.
Were you quite open about that and saying, listen, it's me right now, but I'm prepared to grow the organisation? I mean, because some of the brands you're working with are quite large blue chips, so it's just, how did you give them confidence?
I don't know.
Really?
I guess failure for me, failing small in order to succeed big, I suppose, is what I do. And people that know me know that I work hard, and I'm not going to let something not succeed. So it's having that faith in you. One of the best pieces of advice I was given right at the start when I was looking at what to name the business was to put my name on the door. And I hated, and I still hate the fact that it has my name on the door. We've abbreviated it from Becky Holland Partners to BH&P so that I don't have to constantly talk about it. But actually that is what people buy into, and that's what people bought at the start. They could see what I'd achieved before, and they knew that no matter what happened, I would, work all the hours and I'm sure it was successful.
Does that create, because it's your name on the door, so you started off as Becky Holland, is that, and Partners, that you started off like that before you abbreviated, did that give you more stress, more anxiety, because you think, now I've got to do this, it's my name, it's my reputation? Did that make almost make it harder?
I didn't get stressed.
No. Really?
No, I just think there's bigger stuff that happens in the world. There's a war in Ukraine, there's a global climate crisis, there's pandemics, there's goodness only knows what goes on in the world. I count my blessings every day. Yes, you're under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But I always say, nobody's going to die. If I get this wrong, nobody's going to die. Nothing terrible is going to happen. If my little business makes a bad decision or we do something, it's not going to be the end of the world. And I think that's probably, it's that attitude that's allowed me to weather the storms. And you do, as a business owner, you go through some pretty hairy moments. But if you let it get to you, you just, curl up in a ball, and that's when it doesn't work. So yes, you're right, it puts more pressure, it absolutely puts more pressure on you. But if you're confident that you're doing the right thing, and of course because I've worked in this industry for quite a long time, I know a lot of really good people. My creative director Klaus is brilliant. I know lots of brilliant creative people, brilliant strategists, brilliant digital people. So it's never just me. Even when it was just me, it was never just me.
I'll go back to that point you've made there, because I'd almost say that aligns to my sales career as well, because people always talking, you're in sales, you've got these big targets and you're leading teams, got these targets, etc. And so it must be stressful, and I would probably say it's the same as what you've just said there, which is it's a pressurized situation, but it's not that stressful really, because if I don't sell something, what's the worst that's going to happen? Right, we might not succeed in terms of our revenue growth, but in the bigger picture, it doesn't really matter that much. It's not that important compared to these life and death situations people are in every day. I'm not going in doing like some sort of surgery. My sister's on the pediatrics wards looking after children's lives every day. I'm like, well, that's far more critical than what I'm doing, just trying to sell a piece of software.
Exactly.
And one of my old sales directors, I know when I was sort of learning my craft, I remember him saying to me, it's just selling software. It's not that important. It doesn't matter that much.
No, exactly.
And he was it's because he was able to take the pressure off the team a little bit, which really did make a big difference, because then you're able to be a bit more free, a bit more creative to make things happen, which inadvertently, oddly, can make yourself more successful.
I think also it is quite dependent on what stage in your life you're at. I'm at a point now when, I've got a house, my kids are, either finished school or about to finish school. I'm reasonably financially secure, so I can take risks with things, or if we lose a client or something doesn't work, or actually if there's something we don't want to take on, we don't feel it's a good fit, I can do that and know I'm not going to be struggling to pay my bills, to put food on the table, which is an unbelievably fortunate situation to be in. But I think it does give you the freedom to take more risks, and to go into these things and not feel so stressed about it. And to your point you made about, focusing on the right metrics. Yes, it's about profit and bottom line financially, but it's also about business as a force for good, and being able to make decisions that say, we don't want to work with this client because I don't really like what they do. That's quite hard, but I think you have to have that foundation in terms of kind of financial stability to allow you to say no to things. Saying no to things is much harder than saying yes.
That's interesting, actually. So is there scenarios where you've had to say, right, we're not going to work with this client? You don't need to name them, of course, but you've decided you're not going to work with specific clients because maybe the messaging is wrong, or maybe their approach is wrong. Have you got to that stage now where you can say, right, then they're not going to invest the correct amount into the project? Or what kind of circumstances would you be saying that, no, we're not going to progress with this?
I think we're kind of at that point now. Actually, I think probably over the last few years there have been things we've said yes to, which in hindsight we shouldn't have done, or we've done and they've not panned out the way we would like them to. And certainly I'm much happier to let things go these days than I used to be. So there's a big US software company that we've been working with, who are a kind of a challenger brand, and the brief was fantastic. The brief was, we have this software that can help make small business owners' lives much better, because it's this sort of all-encompassing ERP system that's absolutely tailored to really niche little industries. But the problem is we've got too many product people. We're a product company. Everything is about product. We never elevate the story, and we never talk about the market, and we never talk about the insights, and we never talk about the customers. We never bring that voice of the customer to life. Can we bring you in as an agency to do a deep dive, understand what's motivating these people, and how can we make these entrepreneurs and small business owners' lives easier? You're talking about things like janitorial supplies businesses, pet stores, lumber yards, quite niche thing. So the brief was brilliant. The brief
sounds like a great brief.
The brief was fantastic. But actually what happened was our internal champion, who was the CMO, who was somebody I'd worked with previously, got poached and went to salesforce.com, as you do. And nobody else that was left in the organisation wanted to challenge the status quo. They wanted an easy life. So what had started as a brilliant project actually has become like wading through treacle. And it's one of those where you just have to decide, do we want to keep pushing this? Do we want to keep working with this client? It's a lot of money, but actually it doesn't really fit. The brand promise is right, that it should have the potential, but actually we can't do good work. Not only are we not doing good work for the client because the stuff we're doing is going through umpteen stages of amends and being wrecked essentially, but it's also draining for my team, and I think that's the other piece about kind of being a CEO and running a business that we haven't really talked about. It's about the team, and it's about what's the experience that they've got. And if you hire these brilliant people, that are imbued in your culture and they want to work for you, you don't want to keep giving them work on a client that doesn't deserve it. So I think, being brave and letting stuff go is hard, but you do have to do, you need to reach a certain point, you need to reach a certain critical mass in order to be able to do that. Because clearly, if you say no to too many things, you haven't got enough cash, you're going to go out of business yourself. So there's a balance to be struck. And you don't always get it right. But I think to aspire to work with the sorts of businesses that you want to work with, if you keep pushing for the right sorts of clients and doing the right things, it then puts you in a situation where you can say no to the ones that could earn you lots of money, but actually they're not going to help you achieve your own vision. They're not what you get up for in the morning.
We're a people business as well, and one of our biggest challenges is taking on the wrong clients, but you never necessarily know at the very beginning. Then we enter into a 2 or 3 year relationship with an organization, and what you find is that if they're difficult to work with, sometimes it's down to their internal politics or internal processes. They just drain the team, and then your good people, they just don't have, you can't put them on the best project. It can get really complicated. It can get really complicated.
It is hard, and and I think it's we're still small, which means that you do still have to do some of that. I think it's just a case of being mindful of it, sometimes it sucks. You're working on stuff you really don't want to be doing, but if you can balance it out, make sure that everybody's got a little bit of a good client, even if their main one is a donkey, and calling it out as well, not trying to sugarcoat something that is never going to work. The moment you start sugarcoating stuff or painting a picture that isn't true, everybody sees through it. So honesty is one of our company values, and I think it's so important. You can't be dishonest about these things. You have to call it out, and you have to have those difficult conversations about things. And I think if you do that, then the people that work for you understand that you have their interests at heart. And if you are say making them work, or if they're in a situation where they need to work on a client that is not ideal, they know that and they know that you're working to change it, and that's all you can do. You just work to change it and work to make it better, and you can't necessarily change stuff overnight, particularly in the economic climate we're in at the moment. But talking to people, taking them on the journey, they will be loyal, and the good clients will come.
Yeah. So I'd love to chat to you about a few things which are quite topical within, and certainly for CEOs. And those things I think are often similar, which is the vision for the organisation, the vision and mission, the culture of the business, and also the team that you build to support and to support the strategy and the vision. So when you look at your business and you look at the vision you first started with and then the vision you have now, how is that what is the vision and how has that changed over time?
So the original vision was just around how can I create a small agency that does good work. So we apply the principles of good marketing and advertising that I've learnt from my years working in big London advertising agencies, and have an agency in Berkshire that does that stuff properly. And obviously, earn a living, educate my children, all the rest of it that I need to do through doing that. So it was a lot more pedestrian, I suppose. Still ambitious, don't get me wrong. That's not easy, but it was just about, let's establish a business that does good work. I think for me now, I'm thinking a bit more about my legacy and what I want to leave behind. And I genuinely feel that business is it's not just that business has an opportunity to be a force for good. I think business has an obligation to be a force for good. I think we're in a world where there is a lot of stuff that's going on that's not ideal, for want of a better way of putting it. And if you can use your influence that you have as a business to do something better, whether that's a tech innovation, whether it's around well-being, whether it's around, so I mean, on my podcast last week, I had Mark Cuddigan from Ella's Kitchen talking about, children's relationship with food, and they just been trying to put a bill through Parliament that's all about getting sensory food play onto the school curriculum, so that children have a much better relationship with food. There's a proven scientific link that if children play with food, then when you put it on their plate, if we're talking about young children, they're not going to go, ooh, what's that? They know what broccoli is because they've been playing with it and making paintings with it for the last hour.
We're trying to get Logan to have broccoli at the moment, and he won't do it.
Or maybe you need to do some broccoli painting.
We're like, little trees, have them.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we're a fan of Ella's Kitchen.
Yeah, so there you go. But the point of this is, yes, of course, Ella's Kitchen sells baby food, but that's not what their mission is. The mission is to change children's relationship with food forever, to have a healthier generation of young people that's not going to put so much pressure on the health system, that is going to make sure that they've got the right food for their brains, that they live longer, that they're healthier, all this type of stuff. Ella's Kitchen on its own is not going to achieve that.
Sure.
But by focusing on that, actually, the financial rewards come. They're turning over £100 million and they've got 100 employees. That's £1 million a head. I'll take that.
Oh, wow. I had idea it's that big.
Yeah. They're the UK's number one baby food company. They've got 31% of the market share. They're huge. But that comes from a CEO that said, I'm never going to make a decision again. I'm going to surround myself with people. I can give them advice, but they can ignore it if they like. It's a different way of thinking about things. And so I appreciate I've gone off slightly at a tangent.
No.
But
good.
this is my point in terms of what.
But I love this point around businesses have an obligation to do good.
It's not a choice. I don't think anymore. There's too many people in the world. You've got crazy people like Vladimir Putin doing goodness only knows what he's going to do next. And if we don't use all the things we have at our disposal to try and get stuff back on the right track, we're going to be in a pretty difficult situation. Life's not going to be great for our children and our children's children and our children's children's children if we don't do something about the challenges that are in the world at the moment. And I'm not talking about saving the whale or stopping the climate crisis, but do the bits and pieces that you can. So we as an agency, for example, we work with a leadership development company in Chicago, and their mission is around creating workplaces that are worth working for, eliminating bad bosses, creating culture of psychological safety so that people are able to do the best work that they can. That's meaningful work for us if we can do that, and they can then go and change those culture, and those people can have a better experience and they can do better work. That will have an impact. We work with a client that is around facilitating access to finance for e-commerce entrepreneurs, so it makes it much easier for people to set up small e-commerce businesses and to grow from that perspective. None of these things on their own is earth-shattering, but all of them are things that are going in the right direction. I mean, coming back to the Ella's Kitchen example, one of the things that they've done is they're a B-Corp. They're one of the first 1,000 B-Corps in the UK, which was celebrated last week. But they want all of their suppliers to become B-Corps. So they're working with and facilitating and supporting all of their suppliers and producers both locally and around the world, in terms of how do they become more sustainable, more environmentally friendly, looking at their governance and all the rest of it. So actually they see it as part of their obligation to make all of their supply chain accountable. So that's not just one organisation, that's 17 organisations, 20 organisations, 50 organisations. It's that ripple effect.
Yeah. Can you just give a quick overview of B-Corp? What does that mean?
I knew you were going to ask me that. So I'm absolutely not the expert on this. I'm going to a B-Corp thing later on today.
But you're going through the process, right? You're on the way.
We are going through the process. So we're in the queue. I think there's about a 5-month wait for us to be assessed. Essentially, B-Corp has existed, I'm going to say, for about 10 years. I couldn't tell you exactly. And it's the idea that organisations need to be accountable for the things that they do and the impact that they have on the world. So essentially, you can do something called the B Impact Assessment, which is a free assessment that you can do, which just asks you questions about everything to do with your organisation. Is your team diverse? Do you have an equality policy? What have you done for the local community? What's your carbon footprint? All sorts of questions, some of which are very difficult to answer, some of them are very easy to answer. I mean, there's hundreds of questions. It's not a straightforward thing to do the assessment, and I recognise actually for us, because we're a service company, it was much easier for us to complete than it would be if you were a manufacturer with suppliers all around the world. It would be very, very difficult to complete the assessment. But the point is that you fill in this questionnaire and you get a score. And if you get a score of above 80 and then it's assessed to be correct as above 80, then you can become a B Corp. And I think it just creates it's a benchmark. It's a standard that has been adopted pretty much around the world. So that if you're working with an organisation that has done, if nothing else, they've been through the diligence and the process to really think about these things, and thinking about them is the first step. Not every organisation is going to be able to achieve B Corp status, and in fact, particularly when you become absorbed into a PLC or you go through IPO, and you get to that bigger stage and your organisation gets much, much bigger and much more complex, it may well be it's impossible for your organisation to achieve everything or to get to green. But be conscious of it, be aware of it, know what you should be doing, I suppose. And I'm sure it's not perfect. I know they're evolving it all the time, and they're changing next year they're changing how they do it. But for us, I just felt like actually this is the sort of company that I want to keep, I suppose, and I want to be having conversations with other people that share those values around business as a force for good. And so for us, becoming a B Corp is about putting our money where our mouth is, really, and being part of that conversation and being part of that journey. And I recognise we're a tiny drop in the ocean. You were talking about Joe Rogan's podcast earlier, and he has all these people on there. I was talking to my son yesterday about one, but talks about the infiniteness of the universe and the infinite number of galaxies inside galaxies. And we're like a tiny, tiny speck on the back of a speck of the back of a speck. Like that. You have to be realistic that your individual impact is not going to be huge, but I still want to be able to look at myself in the mirror at night. I want to be able to look back, and think, well, yeah, I didn't do that too badly.
Well, that actually, your point here leads us in nicely into culture within an organisation, because it sounds that's, like you said, B Corp is allowing you to set standards, the ways of working, the practices that you want to have. When you're running an organisation like you are, how do you create a culture, and how do you be able to maintain what it is that you set out to achieve? Because I think it's sometimes in business it's very hard to keep that approach, the standard of work, those sorts of things. What's your views around culture and what you've been able to do at your business?
So I suppose the first thing I have to say, we are still very small, so it's a lot easier because I know everybody that works for me. They all know me. They all get FaceTime with me. So
easy.
It's I think I say it's easy. I think but if you're honest and you're open and you share who you are and what your aspirations are, with everybody, I think then, people can join you on that journey or choose not to self-select out. We've hired people that are not a good fit that have gone their own way. And that's fine. So I think, when you're small, actually, I don't think that's too difficult. There's probably somebody listening here that's going to go, it's really difficult. Just be honest. That's what you have to do. Just be honest about what you're trying to do, and hire people that share that vision, and then it becomes self-fulfilling. And be open. We have had a rocky year. It's been, I think a lot of businesses have had years of ups and downs. You need to be open with people, about the situation with finances and everything else, and make them feel that they're part of it rather than on the outside. And I think that's the most important thing. We do have values, and I'm really passionate about the values that we've got. But I would imagine even if we hadn't written down our values, if you were to ask any of my team, or what do you think the values would be, they'd be pretty similar.
Really? Okay.
But no, it'd be quite an interesting.
That's a good test, isn't it?
Isn't it?
It's interesting. You have to send out a survey. What the values?
Yeah, exactly. But they're, again, it's easy for me to say, the values that are in the company are, things that are true to me, that resonate with me, and that's easy to do. I'm not sure when you're a much bigger organisation that it's so easy, but actually you give those people a voice and let them develop that and let them be a part of it. I mean, hiring good people and keeping them is surely the most important part of this.
Which brings us nicely into team. How do you, because that is probably one of the hardest things in business, is to hire the right people, hire great people, keep those people, keep them motivated. How have you been able to, or what's been your approach to building a great team?
I think you have to not rush. I think when you have a need for a particular skill set, you put a job brief out and people apply for it, and you feel like, I've got to hire the person with the skills to do this job. And I think for me, the biggest learning is actually, no, you don't have to do that. You have to hire for the person. And if you do have a role you need to fill, and there's nobody there that's a good fit, that you don't feel is a cultural fit, and doesn't share your values, don't hire them. However much you really need a content strategist, an SEO manager, an account exec, a creative director, or whatever it is, if they're not right, don't hire them. Find a person that wants to be on the journey, and then train the skills after. We've lost some good people over the years, I think, by not necessarily valuing them or treating them properly, or certainly in the way that in hindsight I would have liked to have done. And I think we've also potentially missed out on hiring a couple of brilliant people, because you sort of stop and think, is there somebody better? Have they got the right skills? Have they not? And then by the time you go back and go, yeah, I think you would be perfect, somebody else has snapped them up. The people that we've got in the organisation now, every single one of them, within the first 5 minutes of talking to them, you're like, yeah, you're one of us, you get it. And I think that's the most important thing. And I think when you create that, and you create a group of people essentially that have shared values, they become the culture. It becomes self-fulfilling. They work together. They want to work together. They want to be together, and the team becomes a team. You stick a bad egg in the mix, and it can muck it up quite badly. You
mentioned something there which I find interesting. So I was just thinking about some of the people that I've hired in the past, and in that first 5 minutes, I think you do know. And it's just then sometimes the rest of the interview, you're kind of backing up your decision with some facts, and it's almost hard once I think about the last year or two of hiring that we've had, pretty much every time you've known in the first 5 minutes. It's not been like, have you found that as well? You mentioned there just that first 5 minutes, and you kind of have a natural intuition that this person's right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to make certain, obviously, that they've got the skills. And I think particularly if you're going into a subject matter expertise, or somebody that's more senior. So recently hired a group account director who's essentially my number two. So that's a big decision. They've got to have the right skills as well, because they need to be up and running, and essentially you're paying them quite a big salary to do that. But even in that scenario, the person we hired, I knew straight away that he was at the right stage in his journey, that he had the right attitude, and you kind of think, actually, do you know what? We can train the skills. This is fine. If somebody wants to do this and they share the vision, which for us is about doing good work, then they will put in the time to make sure that they do that. I'm touching wood again.
That's right. Loads of it to touch.
It works. It does work. And I think, my biggest regret probably in all of this is a few years ago, we made a decision that and hired somebody that, in hindsight, didn't really add anything, and I think caused a lot of issues. They worked hard, they did a lot of good work, but actually they held us back quite a lot. And I think I tend to just trust people and think the best of people. I always see the best in people first, and it takes, somebody has to behave pretty badly before I finally say no, because you want to give people the opportunity to grow and learn. And I think that's the key thing, is if somebody's not right, actually it's much better to call it straight away, or as soon as you know, and to have those honest conversations about it, because actually it drags everybody else down. It doesn't mean they're not a good person or a hard worker or intelligent and all the rest of it, but when you're trying to do something specific and you want to do it in a particular way, you need people that want to do the same. That have the same goal, different ways of doing it, that will challenge you and make you better. Coming back to what we talk about testing, failing and learning, it's really important that you never sit on your laurels. That's, I think, where a lot of marketing goes wrong. People go, we've got a secret sauce, we'll do this, and this doesn't work. Every organisation is different. But you need to have people that you can have those trusted and challenging conversations with, because that ultimately they share your sense of purpose.
When you look back, do you think you can make those decisions based on just tenure, so experience, and thinking, that person wasn't quite right? Do you try and ride it out longer? Do you make a decision sooner? I mean, how do you know? It's such a...
How do you know anything? I think you have to trust your gut, actually. You have to trust your gut. I always want to see the best in people, whether that's in business or in life, and I take it quite personally when stuff doesn't work out that quite well, or when you lift somebody up, or you trust them and then they're not what you think they will be. But I don't have the answer to this at all. I think you have to trust your gut, and if in the same way, if you want to hire somebody because they're a good fit, if you know that somebody is not a good fit, or they're pulling you down, or they're not doing you the right, it's better to have that conversation sooner rather than later, because otherwise it's your own time. Certainly in an industry like ours, time is our greatest asset. Time is the thing that we use to make a difference, not to execute necessarily, but it's the thinking. And if somebody's draining your time because they're pulling in a different direction, then that has a big
it's a big impact on the broader team, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking before we kind of started the interview proper about what's the role of the CEO, and I've always been essentially a managing director, and I've always said, a managing director's job is to manage operations and to make everything happen. And I always said I would never want to call myself CEO until I had a managing director that was doing that. But recently, actually, I've made that shift because I've got a trusted team that's doing the work day to day, and I do not need to be involved in it, and I do not need to know and understand those details. And you do have to have that. You do have to have that trust, and you do need to let it kind of move forward under its own. Being a CEO and being a managing director are very, very different things.
What would you say the difference is? Just from a distance, I'm sort of looking at that and going, as a managing director, you're probably involved a little bit more under the hood, looking at some of the accounts, some of the people, the relationships. But maybe as a CEO, taking a higher view, more strategic. I mean, how would you? So
the way I would look at it. Obviously, we're talking about the luxury of having both managing director and a CEO. I think when you're a founder, you're wearing both hats, which means you have to work in the business. So you have to be under the hood, looking at the nuts and bolts. You also have to work on the business. So you're looking at the financials, the vision, the culture, the business development, the strategy, all of that stuff. And that's a lot. You're essentially wearing two hats, and jumping from one to the other generally means one of those things gets dropped, and it's usually the strategy, the big picture stuff, because if you've got a pitch on Thursday or a big client meeting or a QBR or a or a team offsite or whatever it is you need to do, that's where your focus needs to be, and you don't look at the big picture stuff, and that's just natural. So what happens is you don't look at the big picture, and then 6 months goes by, a year goes by, and you think, oh right, okay, we need to stop and we need to reset, and you get in that cycle of you're constantly growing a bit, then dropping, then growing and dropping, and you never change. And so I think the difference becomes when you can separate those roles of MD and CEO. The MD works predominantly in the business. They know and understand all of the moving parts and make sure that everything works in the best possible way and brings the strategy to life. As a CEO, you should be working on the business. You should be sitting outside the day-to-day and constantly kind of looking at the outside world. And that I guess is the piece that's changed for me in the last few months, by having somebody, regardless of job title, that is looking after the day-to-day. In fact, I've got a leadership team essentially in Klaus and Nav that are doing that. It means I'm freed up to do the other stuff, and it's a really different job.
Which do you prefer?
It's hard because I like both. I like both. I love my business. I love my team. I love what they do. I love the magic of when somebody comes up with a creative idea and you go, oh, that's amazing. Like, I could never have thought of that. That's genius. That's the thing that's going to do. And I love that stuff, and I'm quite removed from that stuff now, from being in the office all the time with the team. I'm finding myself, sitting at home on LinkedIn quite a lot.
It's hard, isn't it? Because you're removed. I'm kind of in a similar role, so it's just like you're sort of removed from the action, and when you're removed, you're just hearing about the great thing that happened. I'll be honest, I couldn't let go when I moved into sales leadership, and I've gone back into to focusing more on doing deals just initially, because I thought it wasn't quite the right time, but I really felt removed from it.
I think you have to. I think there's a mindset shift that you have to make, and I think you have to move on to the next level. What it's meant for me, short term, actually, I think has been a big. It's been a big release and a freedom to focus on the things that I want to do. So this idea of business as a force for good, and actually making connections with the sorts of people that I want to talk to, things like coming on this podcast with you, the B-Corp event that I'm going to later today, because I can be very confident that everything is running like clockwork back at base and I don't have to think about it. But I think I am in the early stages of making that role. I only made this with the shift is kind of in the last sort of 3 to 6 months, and so you do get some days when actually my calendar is not full in the way it used to be. You get up in the morning, and at 9 o'clock you have to, or 8. I mean, I tend to get up and work very early, and then we'll run with the dog afterwards. But you have to make a conscious decision to be present and be at work and do it, because nobody's asking you to come to a meeting, do a briefing, do all this stuff. It's very much more self-directed again, and that's a mindset shift. It's different work, and if you were to do nothing all day, nobody's actually going to know. Not I would know. Yeah. I couldn't do it. But
the dog's had a great day.
Yeah, the dog's had a lovely day. Yeah. Oh yeah, I've been really busy. There's a freedom but also a sense of responsibility in terms of being CEO. I need to be out there making those connections, getting those referrals, finding those potential new clients, so I can go to the team and say, we're talking to these people, we've got this opportunity, here's what we're going to do next. And in my role, I think, and again, this is because of the size of the company we are actually, being the CEO is quite business development focused. We're at the point where we need to grow that pipeline, we need to grow that audience, we need to grow the tribe, if you like. I think over the next 12 months it will evolve quite a lot, and actually it'll be much more about building and strengthening and deepening those relationships with the people with whom we have shared values, and then it will change again. I want to write the book in terms of venture marketing and what we're doing and how we're changing stuff. Love to do TEDx. All these sorts of things will happen in CEO phase 2. CEO phase 1 is about going out and having the right conversations with the right people and being motivated to go and do that.
Which leads us beautifully actually into the next part of the conversation, which is about the future. And it sounds like you've kind of got an idea of where you're trying to take the organisation as well, trying to, and the connections that you need to make to kind of get to those next levels. So what does that look like for you? You mentioned TEDx there as well, and some of those other things. What does that look like in the future?
So for us, I think it's all very well to talk about marketing as a force for good, but at the end of the day, the nuts and bolts of what you do as a marketing agency are fairly similar. You come up with creative ideas, you do campaigns, you build websites, you do LinkedIn campaigns, you make radio ads, you make TV ads, you do email, the stuff that people would expect you to do. So the real question we had, and when we really looked at this a year or so ago, was like, well, how do we actually do this differently? How do we change this, and how do we make sure that instead of just talking about doing good work, we really can do good work? And we came up with this venture marketing model, which we've been testing, and really I think that's the future, is about getting that working and writing the book on that, so that other people hopefully can pick that up and do it. And the principle that sits behind venture marketing is very simple, if you like. In the same way that a venture capitalist will invest in lots of things, looking for the one that works, and they'll be quite happy to accept, I guess, that certain things will fail or fall by the wayside in the hunt for the thing that works. I think that's how marketing should work. And that's not to say we want to take on 10 clients and 9 of them fail and 1 of them succeed. That would probably be a business model that was doomed to failure. But within a client, within an organisation that we work with, we want to test, fail and learn as quickly as possible. So there's no kind of agency secret sauce. There's no, well, we're going to do this in this particular way, we're going to do all of these things, this is what we're experts at. We do SEO, or we do websites, or we do this, or we do that, or even we just do big creative campaigns. It's about that listening and understanding and trying to get to the bottom of, how are we going to accelerate somebody's growth? How are we going to get rid of the barriers to growth? What is the most important thing this person can do now? What's the biggest problem or opportunity that they've got that they can't solve with the resources they've got at the moment? So if they've got a brilliant strategic marketer in-house but no resources to execute stuff, how can we support that? If they've got loads of subject matter experts that writing content and no way to amplify it, well, let's focus on that. So that test, fail, learn methodology, and the fact that it's not a one size fits all, I think is really important. That's the kind of the first part of the venture marketing model. The second one, I think, is coming back to where we originally started this with my background is big agencies and brands. That's the same for Klaus, who's my creative director. I can say with 100% certainty, if you don't have a creative idea that makes somebody feel something different, they're not going to do something different. And I think a lot of early stage businesses in particular do what I would call busy work. So they'll do a lot of marketing, but actually they're just standing still. You can write 10 blog posts a month, have an email newsletter, do all the stuff, have LinkedIn ads, but never grow because the base has changed. And so what our job is to make sure that there's a big thought that sits behind stuff that is going to galvanize people, that's going to make people want to do something different, and then that's supported by genuine kind of journalistic, original content, so that if you're writing an article, somebody actually wants to read it and it's not just clickbait. So that big creative idea is the second part of the venture marketing model. And then the third part is, I kind of loosely call it skin in the game, but I'm not sure that's the best way of expressing it. But it's the principle that if you're constantly charging for agency time, then in order for somebody to do more work, they have to pay more money. If it's not proven, you go to an early stage business and say, well, you need to pay me £20,000 a month, £30,000 a month for this stuff. Like, you know, you don't have the trust there. So the idea is we turn that on its head, and we basically say we will forfeit a percentage of our agency revenue in return for a share of revenue uplift. And what that allows us to do is to uncap agency time, because we know if there is an opportunity that we work on for a client, they need to write a white paper, they need to run an event, they need to do an ad campaign, they need to create a case study video, rather than having the conversation or wasting the time but making a quote, getting them to pay for a certain amount of time, we'll just do it. But the sales that come in off the back of it, the growth that comes from that, we take a proportion of it. And the principle should be that if it doesn't grow, we get paid less. If it grows at the rate that we all think it will do, we'll get paid about the same we would have done if we just charged fees. And if we hit that holy grail, if we've come up with the magic formula that accelerates growth, you know, to 2-3 times what we thought it would be, then we get paid a lot more. But the client also gets paid a lot more. You know, 10% of nothing is nothing. 10% of £10 million is £1 million, you know. And it's that piece, I think, around changing the model that I think is really interesting. How do you free people from that sort of cycle of, well, I'm not going to trust you until you've proven the results, and so can't prove the results until you do the work to pay. And it's like, okay, well, let's just forget all about that. We'll take on the risk, because actually there isn't any risk. We do this for clients every day. We're quite happy. We know that what we do works, but you have to trust us. You have to be all in.
I love this idea of success share.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it, because we do a similar model to that for some of the services in our business, and it has been successful.
Yeah.
Because the customer knows that you're leaning in at a lower cost or no cost, and there has to be a gain, there has to be a success for us. So therefore, you do work well in partnership together.
Yeah.
So I do love the idea of it, but I've never heard it mentioned before in marketing. But for you to do that, I suppose, one, you have to really be picky around the client, because you're relying on a sales team or sales execution to be right as well. So when you're sort of choosing who you're going to work with on that, is there sort of checks and balances you're going through to say, right, we believe we can have growth here, we can have this longevity of a relationship, but for it to be right for us, to make sure it's worth our time, is there something that you need to be going through as well?
Yes.
So I'd be worried about sales execution.
So so you're absolutely right. So this is our experiment, I suppose. And coming back to what I was saying about writing the book on it, I want to try this with 12 different clients in 12 different ways, so we can hit on the magic formula. We've tested it with 4 clients. It's worked pretty damn well for all of them.
Really?
Not so well for us.
Okay.
Having said that, we've had quite a lot of referrals out of it. We've created stellar results for the clients. It's what will spur us on to the next stage, and what will make sure that we get the growth that we need. But if you specifically look at, okay, what would we have earned if we charged fees versus what have we earned as a result of this, we still haven't hit the holy grail for us. And there's a number of reasons for that. Part of it is, I think when you first start, you don't necessarily understand the client's business model and how they generate revenue in the way that you need to. However much due diligence you do and however much you look at the accounts, you don't really know. So kind of our first learning is where we've had this sort of revenue share model, and we've started with clients on day one, doesn't really work. We need to have like a 100-day plan, bedding in, working with them to really understand the business model, number one, but B, also make sure that they're going to listen to us, because the only way this works is if if there's an acknowledgement, they're subject matter experts in whatever they do, whether that's around psychological safety or data quality or energy theft or all of these various sort of quite unusual things that we have clients that do, so they're the subject matter experts on that. We're the subject matter experts in terms of accelerating growth and using marketing as a tool to help you do that. If in that first 100 days either it looks like their financials don't stack up or they're not going to listen, you have to be prepared, I think, to just stop. So I think that's, I think that's that's really the key message that sits behind that. Alongside that, there is an element of diligence. I mean, one of the things you just mentioned was around sales, and it's absolutely fun. It's absolutely fundamental. We work with one of the big learnings was with this data quality business, and they didn't have a sales function when we started. And the problem was we had a 12-month contract. They probably didn't have a sales team until about month 10. So yes, it's working. The marketing results are stellar. But we're talking about there's only one bottom line. We're only getting remunerated on uplift in revenue. We're not getting remunerated on number of likes, number of follows, number of subscribers, number of leads. We're getting remunerated on revenue. And the revenue wasn't coming in because the sales team wasn't there. Mm. Now, if it had been a 2-year contract, it would have been fine, because at the end of 12 months, you reevaluate, you change the levels, and we don't stand to gain in the way we would have done, and I really want to make this work. I genuinely think this is the right model for the future. I don't think it's not so much about the money, but I don't think that, or rather, I do think that as long as an agency is a service provider, as long as you're paying them to deliver a certain number of services and you're paying for a certain number of hours, the agency is always out somewhere up the side. You've got the business as a whole, and the spend through the agency is sort of discretionary. It's sort of out there. You can up it, you can down it, you can do what you need to do, and when times are tough in particular, some will invest more in marketing, some will invest less, but ultimately the agencies come and go. I think only by changing the model do you form that long-term relationship that will weather the ups and downs. And if you go back to the principle about test, fail and learn, the fails should be the catalyst for the big wins. But if you have a fail, in inverted commas, and then you stop the relationship, you're not learning from it, you're not moving on to the next thing. You have to be able to learn. That's the biggest win.
I love this. I love the idea of the model. I really love it. And I think, it sounds like you've had to go through a few iterations. You've had to learn some things to try and get there. But, I think overall, if I'm leading a business, I would love my marketing agency or, team to be in it with me, in the trenches with me, knowing that we've got to get 20-30% growth year on year, or whatever percent growth it is that you're trying to achieve. I'd want my marketing agency to be there. Absolutely.
I think everybody should want that. but surely that's the point. If your agency is charging for you for time, regardless, and let's say, I don't know, you're paying the agency a retainer of £6,000 a month or something like that, and then you have an opportunity. Let's say the CEO is invited to go and speak at an event, and there's an opportunity to elevate that and create a campaign around it, and you go, well, I don't have any more marketing budget, I can't pay the agency anymore. So then you go and have the conversation, like, well, could you turn off the ads? Could you turn off the SEO? What can you turn off to cut that cost down so we can do this thing? You're having the wrong conversation. Yeah. You're having the wrong conversation. Whereas if you just were to go to the agency and say, we've got this opportunity for the CEO to speak at this event, and the agency says, fantastic, we'll build you a campaign around it. You don't have to have a conversation about budgets, because that's not the thing. How freeing is that? You can focus on the right stuff. You can have the right conversations. And there's going to be third-party costs. There's going to be media costs. There's going to be costs for filming, and there's always third-party costs. But the agency's time, which I come back to, is the most important asset. If you've got the culture, you've got the team, you've got the skills. If that's uncapped, you know, and your account manager can come and spend a day in your office and workshop with you, look at your proposition, scope the campaign with you, work it all out, look at the nurture flow, whatever it needs to be, work with the sales team, enable the sales team, and you haven't got to pay for it. Well, that's a no-brainer, surely.
Absolutely. Would you really do it for no money down? Sure, it must have to be a retainer or something.
There needs to be needs to be
Has to be a
So there
commitment.
needs to be a commitment of a certain amount, and essentially I want to make sure I'm covering my costs.
Yeah.
So I'm not out of pocket. So I know what it costs me to hire a person, to have a person sitting in my office doing the work. So as long as I'm not making a loss, then I can cut stuff right back and take the rest of it based on performance. We did actually try. So I was really curious to try when we first came up with the venture marketing model. I said, well, what happens if we try it with a pre-profit startup or an early stage business? And what happens if we don't charge them fees at all? And it was always going to be a punt. And I think you can only do it, to be fair, if you have sufficient revenue coming in from other things to balance it. And you need to be very careful that you do it in such a way that it doesn't have a negative impact on other clients. The moment you're investing in one and a client that's not paying and other people are suffering, then that's no good. You know, sure. You're not being true to your principles. But we did this. There's a lady, Madeline Evans, who's the founder of a SaaS brand called Level, and it's a wellbeing measurement platform. So the idea is organisations invest in wellbeing, but they don't know whether it's working or not. And Madeline's a visionary. She's really passionate. She had one client, but you know, she just needed stuff sorting out. You know, so we decided to take a punt, and we decided, well, let's take her on as a venture marketing client. We won't charge her any fees at all other than third-party costs, and we'll take a share at the growth. And did it work? No, because she was in too early stage. She wasn't ready, and we didn't get revenue from it. But what we do have is a massive advocate. We've learnt so much from the process. We've helped her move her business forward. We've had lots of referrals from it, and it's a net win for everybody, you know. And I think it's a case of understanding, well, what does success look like? And if success for us is about, we need to build the model, we need to get the model right, you have to test all the different versions and see whether they work or not. I think there probably could be a scenario where you have either a pre-profit or pre-revenue business that you could do it for, but that vetting process would need to be much more vigorous. Klaus, who's my creative director, had an idea which actually I think is brilliant. We run some kind of competition, a bit like an incubator, where you get, you know, businesses apply to become a venture marketing client, and you kind of go through the 100-day process with them. At the end, there's a winner, which is the one that you do venture marketing for, because you can do it with the confidence that they're the one that's most likely to succeed. But that's not for now. That's for when that's for when we've proven the model and we're a bit further down the line. But at the moment, essentially, it's a win-win for clients. It's been successful for all the clients we've worked with, and I need, you know, I want 8 more. I want to test it with 8 more. So, you know, there is a massive opportunity out there for somebody that shares our values to kind of join us on the journey. So we will see.
I think it's a great model, and I really hope this progresses for you, because I think when I think about marketing and the future of marketing, I think it's such an interesting, innovative idea for you to do like a success share, skin in the game type approach. And it's hard for a CEO, certainly of a business, maybe of a certain size, maybe not pre-revenue, but of a certain size, to go, well, why wouldn't I give this a try? You know, and why wouldn't we give it a chance? Because, you know, there's nothing to lose. You know, you're going to get some great expertise, and there's a share of the revenue. It just seems like a really sensible, smart approach. I mean, I imagine a lot of sales leaders could think about this as well and bring this in and sponsoring it to their organisations. Absolutely.
And I think the key thing with this as well is it doesn't really matter how big the organisation is. There's always a way of doing this. So we obviously can't do it with our not-for-profit clients, because clearly in the charitable sector you can't do that. But although we can still do the principles of test, fail, learn, and big creative ideas and journalistic content, clearly you can't do the skin in the game. But even with a big corporation, there is no reason why you can't have some kind of results-based success share that's within the. Clearly, they're not going to give you a slice of revenue, but you might be able to get, you know, commission on sales or something related to the specific campaign that you're doing. And I think it's about coming to stuff with an open mind and just thinking, well, what does success look like? What are our goals for the next 12, 24 months, 5 years, 10 years? 10 years is a bit long. You know, and what are the resources we've got available to help us move the dial in terms of performance? You know, and I think if you start with that, you can usually find a way of doing it regardless of the size of the organisation or the stage they're at on their journey. I think there are a lot of organisations that have been really let down by marketing that essentially is busy work. Where, you know, businesses get to a certain point and they might hit a brick wall. You mentioned about, you know, it's easy for the founder to kind of go out and do the selling, but when you reach a certain point and it's good, you think, right, I'm going to hire a sales team, I'm going to get an agency, we're going to do this, we're going to invest all this money. And quite often it doesn't work. You hit that brick wall, but the opportunity to grow is only as good as, I don't know, the salesperson's network, you know, and the agency's doing all the stuff. But the problem is unless you're changing the conversation, it's never really going to work. And so I think the problem is a lot of people have been stung by that. There's a great reluctance to invest in marketing. People see it as a cost on the bottom line rather than an investment. And there's a big gap between the smaller organisations that have that mistrust, you know, and I guess the people at an enterprise level, they just know it's just accepted. And it's much easier for as an agency to go after the enterprises, the big organisations, because they know, you know, we need to invest 10, 20, 30, whatever it is, percent of our revenue in marketing in order to achieve our growth. They've got to that point, that realisation. But if you say to somebody that's turning over £1 million, well, it'd be good if you invested 25% of your revenue in marketing in order to achieve accelerated growth. They look at you like you're off your rocker.
Well, that's taken out all of their profit for the year for sure, and then some.
Yeah.
So now they've got a negative balance.
Yeah, exactly. So some, you know, somewhere in between the two, you need to find a way, you know, and it's about stripping it back and really thinking about, well, what are the things we need to do? What are the resources we've already got at our disposal? What's the most efficient way of doing these things? And what's the most effective thing we can do to change this? And to your point about sales teams, you know, is it about enabling the sales team? Is it about our audience is just too small, we're fishing in too small a pond? Like, what's the thing? And let's focus on that, and let's use a smaller amount of resources, focus on that challenge or that opportunity. And when that's done, don't turn that off, keep that going, but then invest in the next thing and then the next thing. And then you will get to the point where you're investing the level you need to achieve the growth that you're looking for. But it's done in a way that's measured and it's managed and it's controllable. You know, that's what business owners want, is control.
Absolutely. Well, Becky, thank you so much for coming in today. It's been a real pleasure in talking to you. But before we close today, maybe as a point of reflection, when you look back on your career, you know, as I mentioned at the very beginning, a lot of people come into business and they want to aspire to become a CEO. What's the reality of becoming a CEO and leading an organisation versus the perception that maybe you had before? And you know, should it be that aspirational role that people want to get to? Is it as great at the top as people would like to think? Or as I've had other CEOs come in and say, listen, it's very lonely at the top. It's actually nothing like what I thought it was going to be. You wouldn't change it. It's a Matt Garvey interview. It's a brilliant interview.
No, it's lonely. Tis lonely at the top. I don't know. I think you've got to think about what's your motivation. Why do you think you want to be a CEO? Is that so that you can, you know, brag to your mates that you're the CEO and you can drive around in a Porsche, you know, or is it because you've got a purpose, something that you want to achieve? You know, and I think understanding what your motivation is really important. I think if you've got a sense of purpose and something you want to do, then you will deal with all of the ups and downs of it because you're working in the right direction. You're achieving the thing you want to achieve. I think if it's more of a status thing, if it's a money thing, if it's a, you know, I want to, you know, grow to 5 million turnover, get an 8 times valuation, walk out of here with 40 million quid. I don't know.
Do you think if someone sets out with that intention, then there's a good chance it's not going to be successful?
Yeah, because why are you doing... Like, not being funny, but nobody else wants you to walk out with 40 million quid, except maybe your wife. But, you know, that's... It just feels disingenuous. You know, I think I think if you've got something that's unique and you want to achieve something, then you know it's clearly fine to want to make money. Money makes money. That's what happens. But I don't think it can be the only thing. You know, and so I think that's one reflection, and I think the other one, you know, is that it's really hard. It's really hard, like you said. It's lonely, but it's also you know, you're always on, you're always working, and all these conversations about, you know, 4-day weeks and flexible working and all this sort of stuff that people talk about. I work a 7-day week, 364 days a year, try and have Christmas Day off. It's just not to say I work all day, every day, but it is. Yeah, if you think it's an easy option, it's not.
Sounds like it's the hardest option more than anything else.
It is the hardest option, which, you know, which is why it has, you know, it offers the opportunity to make a difference, and why it offers the opportunity to, you know, to win big, I suppose, from a financial perspective as well. But yeah, it's so statistically, you know, people talk about 50% of startups fail, but only 1 in 200 businesses actually scales to 10 million turnover. 1 in 200.
1 in 200.
So if you think you're going to hit 10 million turnover and then sell your business,
1 in 200 is
1
that
in
all?
200.
Wow, that is.
I think it was Deloitte that study that, but I can't quite remember. But yeah, it's really hard to get to that. You can grow to 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, have nice repeatable business, you know, depending on what your business model is. That's fine. But to get to that next level, you know, if that's difficult. It's really difficult. So you have to I think you have to be able to take the blows. You have to be a fighter. I talk about having skin of Teflon. Because you get more knockbacks than you get successes every time.
And when you look at your career and you look at your younger self, is there any advice you give to your younger self around kind of where you've been able to get to? Because it sounds like you're in a wonderful, lovely, successful position, you know, and you've created the organisation which has breathed the culture, and also now you're looking at how can you ensure that your business is doing good in the world, and it sounds like you've almost reached that high status. Is there anything that you give to your younger self as advice and guidance?
Yeah, probably just to trust your gut and to go for it more. You know, it's easy to create barriers and reasons for not doing things, and I think there are a lot of kind of social norms and things that you think you have to do in your life at different points. You don't. You only get one go. So use it wisely.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for your time today, Becky.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.